I remember him when he was a schoolboy, I suppose, because he lived just round the corner, and my lad, Chris, mixed very well with local lads, and he was one of the wilder ones.
There was a certain sort of group of people that congregated in the area of Highgate Road. You know, there was Barzo, Paul Catlin, John Jones, and Tom Moore was this sort of, enigma.
I mean, in those days, kids used to play out. Well, mine did anyway. And they played out together, and occasionally they got into trouble together.
And I remember he had a sort of sparkle in his eye, even then at that young age. There's something, strangely, that's something I can remember about him, yeah.
Met Lee indirectly, because Lee's legend always sort of precedes him, and even after sort of 35 years of knowing him, his legend still precedes him, You always hear us, if you haven't seen Lee for a little while, there's always a story about Lee that, that's doing the rounds, what he's been up to, or he's done something.
I knew of Lee Thompson because he went to Haverstock School. And he was one of those characters that used to appear at school, and then you used to see him on the shed roof, bunking over a wall, and he was kind of renowned for being a bit of a lad.
I always remember, he'd have his astronaut DMs on, really sort of taken in Levi Reds, and he had a really nice dark brown sheepskin, and he looked really cool.
But he was just a very cool cat, he was a very, very, very cool cat.
He was quite shy, really. Shy, and it was like he weren't very confident around girls, really.
Yes, I watched you climb up, I seen you come alive. From them very humble beginnings in W5.
My mother was Lillian Scannell prior to marrying the old man. She came out of Eversholt Street, which is just off of Euston, Marylebone Road. Well, my mother ended up going up in the sort of late 40s up to waitress up in Great Yarmouth, post-war. And that's where she met the old man, Frederick, and shortly after, she was moved back down to London, and he visited a few times, and before you know it, I think it was around about Queen's coronation, I think it was, when they got married.
I really liked Fred. Fred was a really good-looking man as well, and Lily was a pretty woman when she was young. But Fred, I really liked him, because he was a thief, wasn't he? So I remember him as a kid turning up at my house with a load of gear over his arm and things like that.
And his dad was a bit of a crook.
I do remember him saying to us once, "Look, son, do it at night, do it alone." I thought, great advice, Dad, cheers. Take that on board.
I mean, all the kids who were hanging around in that neighbourhood were all a bit sort of, up to no good, and a lot of sort of broken families, and so there would be a lot of petty criminality going on, yeah. Which it would be difficult not to take part in.
From the summer of '69 through till October '71, where I was getting into a lot of trouble at the time, silly bits and bobs. And
everywhere we went, he would suddenly be nicking something or breaking into something.
He had this sort of attitude to other people's property that it could be his as well.
Probably made about 15, 16 court appearances. And the last thing I'd done was I stole a purse from a locker in a dressing room. It was sort of, anyway, you could bend the door open. I had this purse away, and there was a stupid amount of cash in there for that time. It was probably sort of 200 quid, so it's obviously someone's, it's got to be someone's savings, carrying that amount. And it was like, well, bingo. So I ended up giving it to friends down this youth club and buying a girl. I remember buying a girl a smock, a patchwork smock, and some Holy Joes, another person, a dog tooth suit for someone who's just,
But I don't know where these clothes magically appeared from, quite honestly, including Graham's.
A few of the mums were questioning, where on earth do you get this from?
Some of the more middle-class parents of the band didn't like Lee because they didn't want their kids going the wrong way. I'd already gone the wrong way by the time I met Lee.
Because I was working and I didn't have much idea of what the hell was going on, quite honestly. Once, I can hardly believe this really, but in those days the bus conductors used to have a purse of money, which they kept. They didn't always wear, and sometimes they kept it in a little sort of cupboard at the back of the bus. And once, I'm sure, Lee actually leapt on a bus, pinched the bag and leapt off the bus again.
Lee, I don't know why, he asked me, but he said, do you fancy coming for a drive? Basically got hold of his dad's car. I don't think he had permission. I'm pretty sure he didn't. It's a great big red Ford it was. And off we went for a drive, and he could barely see over the dashboard, driving along.
He really worried me because he had all the, they had this potential for getting into trouble. And the kids were, they all went round together, and so it meant that Mike and Chris got into trouble as well.
Oh, he was robbing. He was robbing what he could.
Yeah, we used to go shoplifting. But, that wasn't entirely Tomo. He had a sort of... he was a bit of a criminal, but I think myself, somebody else stole these patches that you sewed on you. There were these patches like a sign, with the stars and stripes on, I remember. We used to sew them on our jean jackets and things. And they were the sort of first things. And then it was mainly albums.
So there was quite a bit of devilment. Chris was certainly up for any sort of lark. And Lee would be ideal, yes. Oh, you would rate him as troublesome.
I got caught doing something once, and my dad had to come to the police station, and he spoke up for me, and he was sort of biting the bullet, saying, that his marriage had broken up, and I felt really bad, and then I just stopped doing that,
I used to go shoplifting a lot with him, like when we first all went round with each other, Mike and Paul, and I got caught and got put in Holloway prison for 3 weeks on remand. And I think that was probably a shock to everyone, because it was my first offence.
I was getting into a lot of trouble at the time, silly bits and bobs, and I ended up being removed from the area.
He got in trouble for robbing the hospital, and he then he got put away. I
was put on this identification parade, and I was the only one in the identification parade. And the woman coming in and said, "That's your man." And I just remember sitting there looking at these bits of paper and thinking, yes, that's this chart. Yeah, I do remember this. I definitely never done that. I wouldn't do a thing like that. No, that ain't me, and that's me. And of course, anyway, you sure you never done? I said, I'm absolutely sure.
I remember he was supposed to call for me one night and he didn't, so I ended up going to the youth club with my mates, and then I saw him in the back of a Black Maria going up Kentish Town Road, right, looking out the window.
When he had a stint in Stamford House down in Shepherd's Bush, a remand centre, and they come along, and Mike and Chrissy Boy brought us in some Cadbury's milk tray or whatever. They come to see. They come along to see us, which I was really, when they left, I was sort of in tears. It's, gut wrenching. And again, sort of. Well, at least you ain't got the ball and chain round you. Where's the stripy things they put on you? Where's your number?
He got put away in Chelmsford, Chelmsford, Borstal.
To me, he was Little Angel, but, as years go by, you find out all the things that might have been going on that you had no knowledge of at all.
I went back home, and I found that my parents had moved. So I looked through the letterbox, and there was just a pile of letters and junk mail there. And I was like, what the fuck's going on here? So I went up to Denyer House where my Uncle Jack was staying at the time. And he said, well, you can kip down here. for a couple of days, but your mum and dad have moved to Luton.
We moved off to Luton, where Lee said he's definitely not coming.
I'd stay at my uncle's for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then it sort of seemed to creep into the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and more I was staying down.
Growing up together at that age, sort of early teens and upwards, it was just that he was funny, he was quirky. He always had this look of sort of surprise going on, but you knew there was something else going on behind that. He was always that lazy fucker in there. But if you knew my dad, you knew it was a term of endearment. He absolutely loved him to bits.
And I started knocking about more and more, less with Bobby Townsend and more with Mike and Chris.
And then there was all that, you know, what he did with the graffiti. Everywhere you went, you'd be going along on a train. I'd go, oh, he's been there. How'd he get up there? And it's like kicks everywhere you went.
Kicks everywhere, you know. Upside down, I'd see him and he'd be spraying, and Mikey, Mr. B.
I suppose it's like those dogs, innit, who like to go and pee around in their territory. Something like that.
We'd seen this colour supplement thing, and we just took up graffiti, and there was a train line that went across Highgate Road, which were freight trains that went out to wherever, northwest, southeast, and we used to sort of jump those.
And we would all jump in, and there'd be about 10 of us.
We would jump on goods trains, you know, and imagine that we were hobos, but we'd go to sort of Highbury, or, you know, and jump off them.
I was always struck by him because he had that mixture of sort of 60s, sort of 70s as well, and a bit of 50s. So he was a real conglomeration of those sort of decades.
We used to get a lot of stuff from Flip and old second-hand shops. And there was a shop in Camden called Alfred Kemp in Mornington Crescent. They said, we could fit anybody. And we used to go in there and get all these, you know, because I don't know, like good kind of tailoring never goes out of style.
Back then, you know, you had 8 old Dr. Martens were about yay high, and he got a pair of his old ones and cut off the top and then laced it onto those. So he really created the extra long DM, and very stylish. You know, this sort of adopting these styles and a mishmash of rocking and skinhead. There was something very cool about how he moved, and I mean, he had very good muscular tone. So I remember once he was standing on the tube, and he, you know, had his boots on, and he was like, holding on, and he was particularly flexing his muscle while he was holding on, and he looked amazing.
We started doing silly things like all painting our Dr. Martens different colours. We half-inch the dyes from Woolworths, change the colours of your boots.
It was brilliant. So he used to have red boots and blue boots and, you know, different coloured laces. And the trousers always used to have an argument with his ankles.
He was concerned about his clothes, but when it come into a bit like, as I say, the New York Dolls, he started, you know, he'd put on a bit of mascara, a bit of makeup, and I just didn't like it, you know.
He always dressed a little bit different. In a sense, like, you know, he still had that skinhead sort of look about him with the shorter cropped jeans and the monkey boots or Doc Martens or whatever, and like the stay press. So he always sort of done something like that, but then he'd add something a little bit different to it.
You know, they'd customise their clothes. I was very like that as well, like go to a jumble, buy something, change the buttons, put great big red buttons on a black coat or paint on your clothes. You know, they'd like bleach things.
I remember one particular party, the lights went off and then there was all this screaming. And half this girl's record collection had disappeared. And out the corner of my eye, I saw a suitcase being lowered on a piece of rope past the window. You know, whether it was Lee or not, let's say it was, someone had taken the fuse out of the fuse box, worked out where the records were, worked out where the suitcase was. So he put a lot of effort into it, that's for sure.
I'd say Sweat started going into like Shannon Fats Domino. I mean, I've still got 2 copies of this Fats Domino album, a brilliant album, and I mean, another record that Lee brought in was Shura. You know, here come my baby Shura. I mean, we'd watch the Fonz and then go down the pub after that. So Shannon, the Coasters. I mean, I think, you know, Lee's somewhere between the Coasters and Davy Payne.
Yeah, he learnt to play his sax. He didn't have lessons. He learnt just playing along with other people's records. Roxy Music, for instance, I know.
Roxy Music, I think mainly Bowie, Alice Cooper, of course.
And I remember ringing Lee at my dad's house. I went, "Have you just watched Top the Pops?" He went, "Yeah, too fucking right I have. Let's get out some leopard skin scarves." So we all went and bought just anything to make us feel like we was a bit of a Roxy fan, you know.
The Sensational Alex Harvey band, it was very theatrical, which we used to see many times, as much as we could, when local, Kilburn and the High Roads, Dr. Feelgood. Normally at Dingwalls, the Tally-Ho in Kentish Town when it was there. Hope and Anchor, of course. The backbone of all of it was pretty much Motown. I mean, everyone, you know, how can you not love Motown? Simple but effective. And reggae. When I heard reggae music coming out the radio, it was quite addictive, really sort of drew us in, those rhythms. And lo and behold, I remember picking up a load of records from this basement of this sort of Aladdin's cave of tat, you know. It's like a tat shop, is that what they would call it? You know, just bits and bobs. And I picked up a few records and it had the Prince Buster name under there on several of them. I thought, ooh, let's have a listen to this.
I was, you know, well into my reggae. And then Lee would go to me, "Tracy, what does this mean?" He would ask me all sort of certain words. There was a song called Welding. It was a bit rude. And he'd go, "What does it mean, though? What's it mean?" I mean, I said, "Well, she wants a bit of the other."
And I was looking for a job, and then Lee said to me, "Well, I could do with like a mate, you know." But he said, "The thing is, what I want to do is I want to get into plastering. There's much more money in it." I said, "Well, I don't know anything about plastering." He said, "Well, look, don't worry about it. Just turn up Monday morning at 7 o'clock outside my flats in Kentish Town." So I did. Lee had acquired some plastering equipment. And we went off to this job. I can't remember, it was in St John's Wood or somewhere. Anyway, so I was supposed to be his mate. It sort of made him look a bit more professional to have a mate, you know. So I mixed up the plaster and we're slapping it on the walls and it's all coming back down again.
Okay. Look, right, last time I volunteered with a geezer, that's what he told me to do, right? That's the only way to do it. I ain't got the proper tools here anyway. I wonder if we should have taken the wallpaper off first. Yeah.
There was more plaster around our knees than there was on the walls, but never mind the ceiling. We never even got to the ceiling. I think after 2 days of this, the site foreman came in and said, "You two can nap off."
Well, there's been some right cowboys in here, you know what I mean?
Well, I'll tell you what, lads.
What?
The best thing you can do
What's that?
is nap off back to the job centre.
Who what? Hey?
Out. Get out.
Yeah, I wanted to earn a few quid. So I started gardening, christened myself, started gardening, which was great, outdoors, fantastic, all of £11 a week, which, you know, when a pound was worth a pound.
I don't know how I got into it, but I convinced him to do a bit of window cleaning, and we charged £6 back and front, inside and out. When the dustbin strike was on, we tried to collect bins from areas, of course. Certain areas were like, they just threw the rubbish in the street and didn't worry about it. And they didn't want to pay for it to be removed.
And that punk thing sort of blew the bloody doors off. Mike could play piano. Chris got a guitar. I acquired a sax, an old Boozy and Hawkes thing, which... somewhere along the line, Deb, I managed to acquire a Mark VI Selma, long story, and which Deb managed to get the money together to buy for us.
My dad used to say that, you know where he got that sax, didn't you? That fucking lazy bastard never bought it when he nicked it, didn't he?
I remember purchasing it off of the people that stole it, yeah.
get out the house, just used to head over this field, take a sort of bit of a packed lunch with us and blow into the cornfields, which was quite nice. That was a nice period. Just learning the basics, you know, rock and roll riffs. I mean, it's all 3 chords, isn't it, I suppose?
Well, my mum used to go, "Don't get that out of here." Lee would play his saxophone in the middle of the field. And we'd be going, "Oh, he can't play that. Oh, stand to that. It's bloody terrible." No.
Always attracted to things like Lee, you know, the Upsetters' Return of Django. That's, you know, an early sax solo. I like squeaks. I like a bit of squeaking. And a love of the common people. Yeah, I was very much drawn to that stuff that was coming out from Jamaica. And, of course, your Motown and Stack stuff.
I do remember him constantly struggling with tuning.
Then try and do some scales. I mean, I wasn't, you know, 8 hours a day, but I certainly had time on my hands to spend a couple of 3 hours a day in amongst doing the odd jobs in Luton, the odd gardening jobs I used to do, advertising gardener available, which I thought, no, that's having a go, you know, sticking on the path of righteousness.
Yeah, it was definitely that Lee and I didn't really have a clue. You know, and to this day, Mike would go, "This is an M, the thingy diminished. Look, you've got to do that note there." You know, it's still like that.
He couldn't play the saxophone to save his life in the beginning, but he learned.
I'm sure he got chucked out the Lido up Harley Hill because he was playing his sax there, and they said he was too noisy, he was causing too much disruption and he was too noisy.
I spent some time around at Deb's where her mum would ask if she could sort of put a sock in it.
My mum used to stuff tea towels down there if ever he was at my house, you know.
And yeah, somewhere along the line I managed to string a few notes together. And Mike was a great help. You know, I remember sitting in a pub with him just going through the scales, the crotchets, the quavers, the FACE, and every good boy does finally, all that, you know, basics, which is handy to know, you know, the value of lengths of notes, etc., etc.
And I remember him giving it to me and trying to blow into it, and I thought, how on earth do you do this? And looking at him and thinking, even though you haven't learned it all properly yet, there's something about you looks like you should be playing this instrument. He had that look, like that old-fashioned look, you know, like one of those old jazz bands that he should have been part of or something.
Define the nutty sounds well. Get yourself a pot, stick in a little bit of Cuban Yarrows, touch of Coasters, Fats Domino and Prince Buster, a smidgen of reggae, and a good bottle of Steptoe and Son. Give it a good old stir. And just that with some handful of lyrics that are pretty quirky, bit not the norm. And that would, to me, would sum up the nutty sound pretty much.
You knew he was going to get noticed wherever he went. He was a good-looking boy. He was lovely. But he had low attention span.
Mike was absolutely determined that they were going to be a pop group. I remember him saying that, you know. And I said, well, does Lee have to be in it? Because he kept on not turning up for rehearsals, and Mike would be fed up, you know, get cross with him, and he'd be moaning about him in the kitchen. And I said, well, why don't you kick him out? And he said, no, he's very important. He's got the right image.
I was in and out. I mean, you know, Mike and Chris were taking it pretty seriously. I was finding it difficult.
I didn't know why, but the band had a falling out with Lee, and he wasn't doing that gig. And we were playing, and then I could hear some sort of shouting coming from the back of the hall. And it turned out that this bloke was shouting, "Where's the sax player?" And like, I obviously not knowing the band very well at that point, I just wondered what was going on. And it was Lee who had showed up at the gig just to heckle and shout out, "Where's the sax player?" So that was my kind of first sort of meeting with him.
And I do remember sitting around the kitchen table with the whole family, trying to think of names for them. And then eventually, I guess Lee then thought of Madness and it was a really good name, yeah.
The Specials came onto the scene, and we all said, they're playing, you know, they're playing the same we're playing the same music. We like the same music. So we should go and see them, or we should get in touch with them somehow. And then we all managed to see them, and they were brilliant live. They were just a breath of fresh air, totally.
It's funny because you think we're talking about like sort of 1975, 6, something like that. Prince Buster's music had only been 5 or 6 years earlier than that. But you know, that thing when you're young, time seems so long ago, 69 and 68 and all that. But no one was playing that music anymore, ska and reggae and all that, completely gone out of fashion. I mean, there was kind of dub reggae, but no one was kind of thought about that kind of pop reggae element that was big in the late 60s. And that was the revelation of seeing the Specials, that they had the same idea. They slightly differently had gone for the idea of mixing it with punk, which made it fantastic, you know. We had the idea of mixing it with British pop music, because it had been in our firmament all our lives, you know.
I think Jerry stayed round Suggs's house and said, "I got a record label, do you want to release a record on it? It's 2-tone records." And Suggs was like, "Yeah, all right." You know, it was that simple, that easy. "Want to make a record?" "Yeah, okay, pop along." The Prince, that was the first sort of lyric I wrote to a melody.
I think the Prince was written quite late in the day. I think Lee wrote the Prince pretty much thinking that we were going to go and record something. The idea is a fantastic idea, because it reminds me a bit like something like Dancing in the Street, a record like that, where it's almost a call to people to say, this is what I really like, and you know, this guy should be looked at, and we should all get out there and sort of like find his records and dance to it and play that kind of music. And it's a fantastic song.
And we went into Parkway Studios and recorded that, and Mike singing My Girl, and Madness, a version of that, all for under 150 quid.
Buster, he sold the heat with a rock-steady beat.
And we went on the 2-tone tour, which is the most exciting time of my life, you know. I mean, being with the Selector, the Specials, and then Dexy's Midnight Runners at one point. You know, it really was the most tremendous. But funny enough, the first thing we did, we got on a coach at the Roundhouse in Chalk Farm, and the first stop was the Watford service stations, which is where all bands stop.
That's where I had this big fight with some skinheads.
Neville Staples, who him and myself, we were the two sort of picked out, I think, from the rest of them. We were the wind-ups.
Somebody called the old Bill.
I remember dancing backwards on this tarmac, the tarmac of this car park, this security bloke sort of asking me, you know, telling me, "Stay where you are, come here," for whatever reason, I don't know, and I was sort of winding him up a bit.
Oh, that's when Lee got into slight altercation with Her Majesty's Finest. Anyway, Lee and Neville and I think Linville from the Specials all got nicked. We hadn't even got to the first gig. Yeah, the Specials were a very potent force, and they were my favourite band, and still are in a lot of ways. That we had to go our own way, you know, and we just felt like we didn't want to stay on 2-tone. And we were looking around for somewhere else. And me and Mike, I think mainly, went to see record companies, and it was just really was like, you know, if you made some cliched film about what record companies were like, it was like palm trees, you know, fella on his feet on the desk, big cigar, you know, the busty receptionist.
And we've been wined and dined by several record companies. I remember going to a few meets with the band. The record companies we went to see that weren't coming up really with what we was after. I think the main thing we wanted was that artistic control.
Somebody in the office one day said to me, there's this band that you should see that are on two-tone that are really quite good.
So we bumped into Dave Robinson, who was running Stiff Records. We liked him. We liked Stiff Records because it had Ian Dury, Reckless Eric, Elvis Costello. Yeah, a lot of bands that we liked.
I was getting married at the time, and we booked them for the wedding. It turns out that they had a bit of an attitude, they told me later, where they thought, oh, record executive guy, you know, which they had a bad impression of generally, you know, getting married, okay, and getting us for the thing, we'll show him a bit. I did go into the dressing room and kind of mention that I didn't really want any aggravation, and that if any untoward happenings would occur, I personally would go in there with a baseball bat and deal with the person responsible, because my wife, who was a bit iffy about whether I should be auditioning bands at my wedding anyway, would not take too well to it. So they kind of took that on board, and it was great. They were marvelous. They opened up with a track, One Step Beyond, with that Don't Watch That Watch.
Hey, you! Don't watch that! Watch this! This is the heavy, heavy monster sound! The nuttiest sound around! So if you're coming up the street and you're beginning to feel the heat, well, listen, Buster, you better start to move your feet to the rockinest, rock-steady beat of madness. One step beyond!
And I thought, God, that's good. You know, that's the opening single. That's a single straight away, and it'd make a good album title. So I was thinking this, and my wife was kind of nudging me, saying, "Stop thinking about that." And they were fantastic. I remember specifically that Chaz Smash came off the stage. He, at that time, was just the Don't Watch This bit. He didn't actually sing in the band, but he jumped down off the stage and got Elvis Costello dancing, which was kind of fairly amazing. Elvis wasn't, into letting people make him dance, and also, set the tone for the evening. Everyone then joined in. If Elvis was dancing, everyone. So they were great. Did a great set.
I mean, me and Lee used to practice the dance in front of a mirror, and I came up with this dance. So it's like, So the idea was the head was like a Trojan sort of helmet. This move was like the braces, the Skinner dance. Do you know what I mean? This was a sort of martial art move from a guy called Bruce Tegner, who'd been in the American military in Japan in the 50s and brought karate to America. So it was, do you know what I mean? It was an amalgam of all these things.
A lot of people think Stiff was a good record label because we were very quick and people didn't get bored.
We were going into the studio to write the second album, absolutely. And we had several tracks. I'd written, I think Close Escape just came immediately around about that time. But Embarrassment was quite difficult because it was a touchy subject. And the clock's ticking down to go in the studio, and Mike now has worked a tune out to go with the lyrics that I'd had, and I think I'd only sent him half of them. On a cigarette packet, I think was one, or a napkin, saying as you do when you get that, quick pen paper.
I always get the ump with him because he writes everything on bits of paper, and then obviously they all get, where's that bit of paper? I'm like, why don't you just get yourself a book?
Got it finished in the end over a period of, I don't know, a month, maybe 6 weeks. I wish I'd had more time to spend on it, but then, how long's a piece of rope? Old Dave Robinson.
Lee and his team developed all their own style. All their own personalities became different. Lee's was, slightly tyrannical. He was definitely a pirate generally. He was always secretive about what he was going to do. He would obviously spend quite a bit of time thinking about it and doing a bit of research. Not for the gear. He left that to me or somebody else had to get it together. But he'd have some obscure thing.
Yeah, and it was a great label. It stood out from the rest.
And they were so quick. They had such a natural comic routine, all of them. That was the remarkable thing. They were all very similar in their talent and ability. One great thing for me is that every time we did a video, there was always a piano in it. And Barson would always be playing the piano while he was waiting for the next shot. So I regularly heard the next single off his piano at video shoots. I was like, what's that? What's that song? Oh, this song we're writing, or blah, blah, blah. You know, I think, oh yeah, that's pretty good, that one.
It's just like a kids in a sweet shop type thing. And you got to play mute, do a job that you thoroughly enjoyed. The band were offered a series via Ben Elton and the team, which we'd done a pilot for, and Mike was like, "Well, I'm thinking of bailing out here. I want to spend more time doing this, that." And that was a big shock to us. That was two big explosions. There was that. Our Stiff Records contract was coming to a close. We had another album to make. And what with Mike leaving and the Stiff Records bomb going off, we were all a bit headless chickens, like, what do you do now? What do we do now? What do we do now? And we went to Virgin Records, and it was like, from basically Stiff Records to Virgin Records, it went, wobbling off like a three-legged horse, aimlessly. What are we going to do now? Yeah, we made this album anyway with called Mad Not Mad, and it was like, didn't feel part of it. There were session players that were coming in and some drummer from Gloucestershire. It was a bit of, again, as Suggs put it, a polished turd.
Virgin had very kindly given us enough money to start our own record label, which was pretty much a disaster because none of us had run a record label before.
We had our base in Caledonian Road, where we had a studio in the basement, and the management upstairs, and all under one roof. And I remember being up on the top floor with various members, and Woody and Mark being downstairs, and not a very nice period at all. It was like sort of the daggers are out, time to split up. And I went downstairs and said to Woody and Mark, I think this is it. We're going to clean up here, finish up, and pack our bags and leave for the station. And we all went our separate ways, except four of us came back as The Madness. And this time it was a drum machine and bass-o-matic. I don't know what. It was very synthetic, a very synthetic album. Some good stuff on it, but it would have been so much better with Mark, Woody, and even Mike's involvement.
Yeah, well, Lee was always up to something. I mean, not always musical either.
I sort of got away from the music for a while. I just wanted to be away from it, anything music, and I started up a couple of firms, a gardening firm. I had myself a nice little estate car with a few shovels, pickaxes, and garden hose in it, and I started a firm called Rosebud after the Citizen Kane film, and I found myself standing in the middle of a garden at midnight, trampling turfs down, where I'd sort of underquoted myself. And so that went up the wall, along with my decorating firm, which I quickly started up, self-employed painter decorator called Plumline Decorators. And I remember doing one wall, and I thought those bluebells look a bit sad. And I'd hung the room upside down. When my friend arrived, he went, "The reason they look sad is because you've hung
the whole room upside down. Plus they had bubbles in, you know, under the wallpaper.
I would do anything. I'm one of them type of people. I just think, you know, I need to earn money, so I'll do something.
I was running very low on cash, so I needed to sell something. So, yeah, I ended up selling this warehouse and moving up the High Barnet. Nice leafy High Barnet, which was end of the Northern Line. Yeah, that freed up a bit of cash, with which I started up a mountain bike shop in Notting Hill Gateway, which my wife kindly ran. It was a franchise thing, but I put the house up as collateral that I'd only had for like probably 18 months, a couple of years. Bike shop was going down, the Nutty Boys was going down. I sort of got very depressed, and you know the alcohol doesn't help, and I was sort of under the covers for a good several months, you know, a good year, you know, just pulling the covers up and sleeping all day and wandering the house at night, you know, not a nice place to be, and just probably feeling really sorry for myself, and then my wife threw the sheets back and said, "I've got you a job, a bit of work doing it for environmental health." I said, "What department's that?" She said, "A dustman." And
Lee didn't last very long doing his dustman job.
I landed up being a dustman for about 6 weeks, and it got us out of bed and it kept us fit. It certainly kept you fit. We sort of running figures of 8 round each other.
I don't think he could have stuck a normal job.
You know, another one's where I put a bucket on. I guided it on this time, and it pinched my glove. So I started going up with it. Unfortunately, I pulled my hand out, and still got my little fingers here. And I thought, this ain't worth, you know, the £100 a week or whatever. Yeah.
But I don't remember really being that scared about it. It was just, well, what's the worst that can happen? We'll end up back in a council flat sort of thing.
So I ended up fly posting shortly after leaving the environmental health, and that was a game of cat and mouse. Certainly it was much better pay, unsociable hours, but much safer, shall we say.
Lee maintained that the fly posting kept him out of the pub. So that was his suggestion to me. My feeling is that Lee enjoyed the challenge.
As I say, the monies from that kept the wolves away from the house. But I was looking at investing in a 5-man tent or a family tent of 5. You know, I had a charge on the house, and I even had a second charge on the house, so that was definitely going. I mean, through this mountain bike shop, which is now, you know, of course, folded. They'd done a survey, and the survey said, you know, if you go out on the road, you'll be able to, if we release this album, we're sort of pretty sure it'd go to, you know, at least top 5.
When we did Madstock, it was one of the few gigs where the whole backstage area was 3,000 people backstage. It cleared out completely. People cried, you know, it was a massive event.
I'm still fly posting, you know, as Madstock is approaching. So that must have been sort of 91, 92.
He had a tremendous loyalty to his the company that was that he did the fly posting to, and I remember having a conversation with him. We were trying to balance what the earnings were of fly posting, what his earnings were as a performing with Madness at Wembley Arena 2 nights there.
Love's Truck was the sort of the first newly sort of piece of new material we'd started writing. We'd done all the Christmas tours and the going around doing all the old stuff, and thought it was time to push the boat out a bit. So everyone put pen to paper and started writing. And one of the first releases from the newly wonderful album was a track off of that called Love Struck, which I wrote with Mike, which there was a period where I really started I had a lot of time on my hands, and was frequenting the pub. I like a drink, all right? Who don't? Everything in moderation, though. And was staggering home. Friends and loved ones that have done no wrong, etc. It was just about just losing it in the bottom of a bottle. Just really stepping back and looking at what you're doing here, because it was it was close. The house, family, and everything. The usual. I ain't going to go on about it, but it was touch and go.
The words are just brilliant, I think he's just writes some brilliant lyrics, yeah.
From them very humble beginnings in NW5.
NW5, again, was just... I was feeling very sorry for myself. I'd recently... It's basically about friendships, starting, being, ending, and some last forever, like Mike and Chrissy Boy, we've known each other since 10, 11 years of age. And we've been, you go through those ups and downs. Yeah, it's just about the falling out with friends that you've known for so long, and all the memories that go with that. Generally good memories, but we all grow, and like a sort of marriage, you sort of grow apart, or out of love, out of friendship.
One of the great things, or images of Lee, is flying about on a string, playing the thingy, whatever it's called.
When I was younger with him, we had this way of bunking out of Kentish Town Station, but you had to walk across these signals, and so it's 2 bits of wood, about that wide, about 40 foot up, and he would just go, and I remember sort of crawling along.
Chris was always trying to get Lee down from climbing things, and Lee got arrested for going up a church spire in France, and Chris had to get him out of jail.
And he's still not got much fear of heights.
I remember once in Europe somewhere, probably Prague, Lee started to climb up the rigging at the side of the stage, which is nothing new, but this was a big stage. We had a 40-foot backdrop, and the bars going across were 10 feet above that. So he was, by the time he got to the top, he was over 45, 46 feet in the air, wearing a saxophone, very, very hot, summer's night, scaffolding poles.
He's got a very strong grip.
They're this sort of width. Lee's hands are not the biggest hands, and they wouldn't go all the way around that for sure. And he's got a saxophone around his neck, and he's climbed to the top. By which time I'm watching this, all the eyes of health and safety, police are watching, security are watching, the band are keeping an eye. But we've seen it all before. But then he proceeded to hang from the centre bar, and to walk across by a monkey grab across right into the centre. So by this time, he's hot. He's got. We're worried now.
It's a bit of a problem now because he's not as slight as he used to be, but he will insist on climbing up the lighting rigging. Yeah, and then he's dangling over your head, and you think, I am going to catch you if you fall, but I know I'm going to die if you land on me now, you big fat fuck.
It's the only time I've felt really, really scared for his safety. That anybody he might fall on.
Then he can't move for 2 days because he's pulled all the tendons out of his arms.
I was playing a festival called the Big Festival. My wife described it as Bowden catalogue on cider. Lee had taken upon himself to scale the lighting rig. I couldn't actually physically see him and couldn't imagine what he'd be doing. I believe his wife had just said, he's just showing, it's just attention seeking, ignore him.
Anyway, that's enough about me. Tell us a bit about yourself.
And another story which I really loved, was told to me by Arabella Weir, who's the actress in The Fast Show. She was going to an audition at the Roundhouse one morning, walking along the road, really quite early, and coming the other way was Lee. And Arabella said, "Oh, hello Lee, you're up early, what are you up to?" "Oh, I'm just out, I'm just sort of wandering around." And Arabella said, "Well, I'm going to an audition at the Roundhouse, so, hope it goes well and that." And he said, "Oh, I'll come with you." So he went to the audition. He took part in the audition. He read for one of the roles in the audition. And Arabella said he was incredibly impressive. And the director would have hired him, but he didn't have an equity card. And that, in fact, he just needed someone with a little bit more experience. And Lee possibly couldn't commit to the whole run of the shows anyway.